Hello and welcome. I am Devika Devan and you're watching the NewsX Eurozone. Let's take a look at the top headlines. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says Russia is analyzing latest Western sanctions and will act according to its own interests. He further emphasized that Russia is not against someone else. US President Donald Trump has announced an immediate end to all trade negotiations with Canada, accusing Ottawa of egregious behavior over a political ad featuring Ronald Reagan criticizing tariffs. Trump has also imposed a 35% levy on Canadian imports, with exemptions for goods covered under the USMCA trade deal. US President Donald Trump will meet Chinese President Xi Jinping in South Korea on the 30th of October on the sidelines of the APEC summit, the White House has confirmed. It will be the first face-to-face between the two leaders since Trump's return to office, as trade tensions rise over Washington's threat of 100% tariffs and Beijing's restrictions on rare earth exports. US President Donald Trump has dismissed efforts by Israeli lawmakers to advance legislation annexing the occupied West Bank, saying Israel is not going to do anything. The bill, which would apply Israeli law to the territory claimed by Palestinians for a future state, won initial approval in the Knesset on Wednesday. Marco Rubio has warned that Israel's move towards annexing the West Bank could undermine President Donald Trump's Gaza peace plans. Speaking before departing for Israel, Rubio said that the president had made it clear that such an annexation is not something we'd be supportive of right now, calling the Knesset vote potentially counterproductive. The United Nations has called on Israel to allow more aid trucks through additional crossings into Gaza, saying current levels fall short of the ceasefire terms. Palestinians continue to face severe shortages of food and clean water, with many unable to return home amid an ongoing Israeli military presence. Argentine President Javier Milei has urged supporters at a Rosario rally ahead of Sunday's midterms. Milei seeks votes to sustain his austerity policies, economic reforms and labor and tax plans amid pressure from the US and slipping approval ratings. Lebanon's health ministry says 4 people were killed in Israeli airstrikes in the country's east and south. The IDF confirmed hitting targets linked to Hezbollah, saying the group had used the areas to plan attacks against Israel. Our top focus: Russia and Ukraine continue their war of drones and missile strikes, even as Ukraine's Western allies ramp up their pressure on Russia through fresh sanctions on Russian oil export infrastructure. Russia has said that the Kremlin is analyzing the latest sanctions and will act according to its interests, following Hungarian PM Viktor Orbán's bold declaration that Hungary will help Russia avoid the sanctions. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has said that Russia will do what suits its interests and will not act against another power. This follows the sanctions imposed by the US and the 2 biggest Russian oil companies, Lukoil and Rosneft. In more news on the war front, Russian Defense Ministry has claimed to have captured 3 more towns in eastern Ukraine. According to the ministry, Russian troops have taken in certain parts of a region, prominent in Donetsk as well as Zlagoda region as well, have been captured by Russian forces. NewsX has not been able to independently verify these claims. This comes as Ukraine ramps up missile and drone strike offensive, with reports of Ukrainian drones striking an apartment complex in Moscow region. 5 people have been injured in the attack, according to Moscow region Governor Andrei Vorobyov's Telegram channel. Joining us in the broadcast is Mr. Andrew Latham, Professor of International Relations, joining me live from Minneapolis. Professor Latham, I have to begin by understanding, what is your perspective at this point in time of where the war situation stands between Russia and Ukraine?
Well, the war situation is actually quite straightforward at this point. The Russians are making grinding advances. There's an occasional Ukrainian counteroffensive, but by and large, the war on the ground very slowly is unfolding in Russia's favor, especially now in Donetsk and Luhansk. Those are the two most important provinces from Russia's perspective. That's on the battlefield. On the strategic plane, there's this exchange of long-range fires, drones, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, and both sides are looking to knock the other's economy out for the winter. For the Russians, it involves going after the energy infrastructure that both fuels the war effort, but also to undermine morale by making it very, very cold for the Ukrainian people during the winter. And on the Ukrainian side, they're looking to knock out Russia's principal source of international income, which they're using to fund the war, which is their oil infrastructure. Occasionally, missiles go astray. And hit and injure or kill civilians. And both sides are playing the propaganda card, claiming that the other side is deliberately attacking civilians, which I don't believe to be the case. But civilians are being killed. So that's where we are. If I had to put my finger on one side or the other as victors, I think the Russians are slowly prevailing, which is why Western pressure, with the exception of Orban's Hungary, is building in Europe and, of course, Donald Trump's recent economic moves.
Professor Latham, interesting that you bring up Europe. I have to then understand from you, there are clear headlines since a few days that EU is in fact stalling an over 100 billion euro loan to Ukraine now, and it finds itself in quite a sticky position. What's your perspective on that, on Europe's promise of assisting Ukraine financially?
Well, yes, Europe's divided. It's divided regionally. Those frontline states are more willing to support and do whatever it takes to support Ukraine because they think they might be next. The farther you get from the Ukraine-EU border, the less support you have. And then there's also a vertical divide, as it were. Elites in Europe tend to be more in favor of supporting Ukraine, whatever the cost. And of course, people down the food chain, as it were, the working classes, middle classes, don't want to be taxed to pay for that war when those tax dollars could go for other purposes domestically. So support for the war is waning, I think, if I were to generalize in Europe. Which means that in various parliamentary contexts, that sometimes you get things like these aid packages being held up or being derailed even. And so that's where we are in terms of the domestic politics in Europe.
All right, Professor Latham, stay on with us as we shift our focus to more news. France's socialists have threatened to topple the government by Monday if their budget conditions are not met, warning that they would file a no-confidence bill next week if the mega-rich are not forced to pay more tax. Given the dynamics of France's starkly divided parliament, the socialists have the power to topple Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu's weak minority government if they partner with the far left and the far right, which have already said that they want to oust him. However, Prime Minister Lecornu has managed to win socialist support by pledging to scrap a landmark pension reform. But the left believes that it can extract greater concessions as talks to pass the 2026 budget begin on the floor of the National Assembly. Mr. Andrew Latham, Professor of International Relations, with us on the broadcast. Professor Latham, interesting developments continue in France. What are your predictions as far as Lecornu's government is concerned?
I think Lecornu's government might hang on if they can convince the socialists that that's all they have to give. The pension reform, reducing the retirement or increasing the retirement age from 62 to 65 could save the French state a lot of money. The French state is facing a real budgetary crisis, a structural one. It needs to make either big cuts to expenditures or big increases to income. The socialists, of course, would prefer big increases to income by taxing the billionaire class more. But that, of course, will drive capital out of France and in the medium to long term exacerbate the problem, make it much worse. So the current government, which is a minority government, is between a rock and a hard place, as it were. And it remains to be seen if they can do a deal that will satisfy the socialists. There's not much they have to offer. They simply cannot undertake the kind of cuts they need to take and satisfy the socialists while at the same time keeping the French economy afloat. It's a very difficult situation to be in, and it remains to be seen if they can negotiate and navigate these troubled waters. I rather suspect, given the recent track record of minority governments in France, they won't be able to.
At the same time, Professor Latham, given the potential instability and policy shifts that you've also just outlined, what do you think become the short-term and maybe even long-term implications as far as decisions within the EU are concerned, vis-a-vis the war that we were just discussing?
Yes, I mean, it's not just France that's in economic difficulties. It's true across most of Europe. The UK and Germany are all showing signs of, if not going into recession, certainly not doing well on the economic front. And that requires hard choices. And if you're an elected politician, and most of them are in Western Europe, thankfully, you have to decide between making cuts that are going to affect your constituencies, your base, or are they going to affect the Ukrainian people? And in those circumstances, the rational and logical thing to do is to make the cuts that are going to affect the Ukrainians and not your own domestic constituencies, the people that you need to stay in office, as it were. And so the electoral cycles vary across Europe. Of course, the Brits don't have one from their 4+ years. The French have one because it's a minority government in 5 minutes, if that could be the possibility. But if we look at the big picture from 30,000 feet, I think this is another factor contributing to waning support for Ukraine, which is likely to really begin biting in the medium term.
Absolutely. Professor Latham, thank you so much for joining us on NewsX with that perspective. Meanwhile, in other news, a spokesperson for German Foreign Ministry has said that Johann Wadephul's trip to China, originally scheduled for Sunday, will not take place. She's explained that the journey is being postponed to a later date, citing concerns over restrictions on China's rare earth exports. She has further added that it has also been impossible to arrange enough meetings for the trip. When asked which country cancelled the visit, she declined to mention it, but noted that Germany regrets the development, given China's key influence over Russia in the war in Ukraine. Joining us on the broadcast is Mr. Andrew K.P. Leung, independent Chinese strategist. Mr. Leung, I have to, of course, understand from you, what do you make of this controversy between Germany and China?
China, since October, since this month, has become the largest trading partner of Germany, ahead of the United States. It's because of the trade between Germany and the United States has been affected by these tariffs, and China has always been a very important trading partner of Germany, in the sense that German export of its high-tech products has been very, very competitive vis-a-vis other importers. Secondly, it's Germany who requested this foreign minister visit in the hope of recalibrating relationship with China. Not that they would embrace China, but then, as you pointed out, they would like to explore China's more positive role in helping to stop the war in Ukraine. But also exploring the possibility of China's huge market potential, particularly in the light of the latest formation of the next 5-year plan in China. So all these dynamics added up to suggest that this request for the meeting in China by the foreign minister of Germany has been viewed in Berlin as highly important. But the postponement is because apart from the meeting Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, it's not possible to organize a higher level meeting. For example, Premier Li Qiang is going to visit some Southeast Asian countries this weekend. And also China has just recently announced restrictions on rare earths. And of course, the restrictions on rare earths are aimed at the United States, but also other countries which may use these rare earths to supply United States. So, but as far as Germany is concerned, it needs time to talk about how to negotiate, how to navigate these restrictions, because rare earths, of course, are very important for all sorts of high-tech products. But I think that the postponement is mainly because of difficulty of organizing any higher-level meeting. And then there's some advantage in postponing the meeting in the light of the forthcoming meeting between President Trump and President Xi a couple of days later on. So I think Germany might like to watch what's coming out of this meeting. So a combination of factors.
Mr. Leung, I also have to understand from you. We've also heard that earlier on Friday, a Chinese foreign ministry spokesperson did criticize Berlin for its stance over Taiwan, which they've said that calling for the preservation of status quo in the region without rejecting Taiwan's independence, as per the Chinese, tantamounts to supporting Taiwanese independence activities. Do you think that this was China's signal to Germany over its positioning vis-a-vis Taiwan? And do you feel that somewhere China will be able to build pressure on countries in the coming months and years to change their position vis-a-vis Taiwan if they want to continue engaging with China?
I don't think that Germany is overtly sort of hype up on Taiwan. After all, Taiwan is not recognized as a country by the United Nations, and there's one China policy. Taiwan has always belonged to China. If you look at history, it was already occupied by China, by mainland China during the Ming Dynasty. I mean, you're talking about the 1300s AD. So it's always been part of China, except that after the Kuomintang retreated from mainland, it established its government in Taiwan. And before the formal recognition of the People's Republic of China, Taiwan had a seat in the United Nations. But after President Nixon's visit, trying to broker rapprochement with Chairman Mao, Taiwan was de-recognized. And I don't think Germany, far away in Europe, is overtly hype up on Taiwan. And I don't think that there is a false rhetoric in the West that Beijing was about to invade Taiwan anytime soon, by the year 2027, for example. I mean, this was a date when President Xi said that the military must be ready in case Taiwan dares to declare formal independence. It must be ready by that time. But it doesn't mean that Beijing will invade Taiwan, because the solution, the proposed solution, is for peaceful unification. The two people are getting closer and closer together, and lots of job opportunities for Chinese young people, and then many people-to-people exchanges between students, universities, and tourism, for example. So I don't think that the Beijing wants to invade Taiwan, because there's a trap, because the Taiwan waters, the Taiwan Strait is treacherous waters, and if it's not careful, Beijing could be dragged into a quagmire. So I don't think that on all fronts, Germany is overtly concerned or hype up on Taiwan, and that's by no means the reason why the visit was postponed.
Absolutely, Mr. Leung. Thank you so much for joining us on NewsX World with that perspective. Meanwhile, in the United Kingdom, Prime Minister Keir Starmer has joined the Royal British Legion's annual Poppy Appeal, honouring the nation's armed forces community. The Prime Minister welcomed veterans and puppy collectors to Downing Street, making his donation, and received his puppy. The Poppy Appeal, a British tradition dating back to 1921, supports serving and former military personnel, helping to rebuild lives and ensure that no veteran faces hardship alone. During this period of remembrance, Starmer said the poppy serves as a powerful symbol of courage, sacrifice, and the values that unite the nation. Meanwhile, after attending the EU summit in Brussels, French President Emmanuel Macron at a recent press conference has said that it is still too early to express a definite French position on the planned EU-Mercosur trade agreement. He has further added that steps are being taken in the right direction, which distinctly highlights a proposed safeguard clause and improved controls on flood products entering the European Union. Let's listen in to what other remarks he made.
La position est claire, le travail continue en vue, et on a toujours dit de pouvoir finaliser, mais je remercie la Commission qui vraiment respecte les engagements qu'elle a tenus à notre égard, mais on a les clauses de sauvegarde, on a le renforcement des contrôles douaniers, on a les soutiens à l'élevage, on a beaucoup de mesures d'accompagnement, ici aussi d'un meilleur contrôle des produits sanitaires et phytosanitaires qui entrent sur notre sol, qui sont en train d'être mises en œuvre, et donc on attend la finalisation de tout cela. Puis on attend aussi la notification aux pays du Mercosur de ces mesures de sauvegarde et de cet accompagnement indispensable qu'on a demandé pour améliorer l'accord. Et donc les prochaines semaines me permettront de vous répondre de manière définitive. Aujourd'hui, le gouvernement français, comme les autres d'ailleurs, attend ces réponses, mais tout ça va dans le bon sens pour protéger les secteurs qui sont les plus exposés et aussi protéger les consommateurs européens.
And that's a wrap on the NewsX Eurozone. Keep watching NewsX World for more news and updates from around the world on the other side.